Hey guys, my name is Trevor Sullivan. In this video, I wanted to talk to you about how you can use parameter validation in PowerShell. Now, PowerShell parameter validation is kind of a big topic, but in this particular video, I wanted to specifically cover what we call the ValidateScript parameter attribute and show you how you can use that to perform advanced parameter validation on your PowerShell functions. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out by creating a PowerShell function at a very basic level, and then we're going to add some parameter validation to it. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's go ahead and say we want to create a function that allows a person to eat. Well, the first thing we have to do is define a person class that contains our definition of a person. So a person could have a first name property, and it could also have a last name property. Now, let's say we want to create a function that allows the person to eat. So we could define eat as a method on the person class, but for the sake of demonstration, we're actually going to declare this as a separate function from the person class. So let's go ahead and create a function called eat. And we're going to go ahead and put the commandlet binding attribute to make it an advanced function. And we're going to create our parameter block. Okay, so down here is where the body of the function is. And our parameter block is where we're going to do the parameter validation that we talked about earlier. So let's go ahead and just say write output as part of our function body. And then we'll say write output input object person named X is eating. And then we'll do person.firstName. So we're going to have to declare a parameter called person because we haven't declared that in this function context just yet. So let's go ahead and add our person parameter here. So we can do that by simply typing a variable. Using variable syntax, we declare a parameter called person. So at this point, we haven't told the function that we specifically require a person or any specific attributes about that person to be a requirement or a confirmation prior to executing this function, right? Or a constraint is what I was trying to think of. So we haven't declared any constraints on this parameter. So what we could potentially do is call this eat function and specify the person parameter, and we could specify an integer, right? Well, that doesn't really make much sense because the person, we're expecting to have a first name property, right? And an integer doesn't have a first name property unless you explicitly add that, which technically you can do with add member, but that kind of exceeds the scope of this particular video. So what we want to do is really, first of all, constrain it down to a person object. And we can do that by, well, first I want to just demonstrate this to you. So let me do F5 and see what the result looks like. So Visual Studio is just loading up here really quickly. Let's pull up the console here. Looks like maybe the extension is hung up a little bit. So I'm just going to do a reload window in my command palette here. All right, so we've reloaded the window. The PowerShell extension is starting back up. There we go. So let's do F5. And so it's going to declare the class, declare the function eat, and then call the function eat. And it looks like we're having a little bit of an extension issue here. So let's go ahead and cancel that, and we'll just do a Control A to select everything. And, oh, there, it finally decided to work. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and just hit Control B to close that side thing there and take a look at what happened here. So we declared the class, we declared the function eat, and then it said person named X is eating, right? And the reason that we had a null representation for that placeholder in what we call .NET string formatting is because that integer that got passed in to the person parameter didn't have a first name property. So step number one is we want to declare that the person parameter needs to be a person object. So now if we were to rerun this, I'm just going to add a clear host command here to reset the console each time we run this. So I'm going to hit F5 to run that again. And now you can see that we are actually getting a validation error on the, so it looks like PowerShell just terminated here. Let's go ahead and just restart the extension. And let's go ahead and do a Control A, and then we will hit F8. And now you can see we get this error that says, hey, we can't do argument transformation. So what does that mean? What is argument transformation? Well, it basically means that we are feeding an integer value into this person parameter that we declared on our eat function. And it's trying to take that 1 and transform it into a person object. And PowerShell doesn't know how to take a 1 and turn it into a person, right? That doesn't really make logical sense, right? So what we have to do is instead feed the person object, feed a person object into our eat function. So let's go ahead and do that now. So we'll create a new variable called myPerson, and we'll do person new, and that's going to just create a new person, right? And so now we'll have a new person object in there, and then we'll set the first name property equal to Trevor. And now we can pass this constructed person object into our eat function, right? And so because the person has a first name property, we should now see a more relevant output from the function, right? So let's go ahead and just do a Control A, Control, and then F8. So now you can see that the function not only ran successfully, but it also printed a statement that we expected, and it looks more logical. It reads like English, right? Instead of having an empty first name. But what if we wanted to add a further constraint on top of just being a person object? So let's say that our eat function could only operate on a person that has a first name that starts with an S, right? So if I try to eat, my name is Trevor, so my first name starts with a T, and because it doesn't start with S, I'm not allowed to eat, right? So the way that we can do that is with this parameter attribute called ValidateScript. And the way that you declare this is by putting it in square brackets. And as you can see, there's actually a bunch of different validation, parameter validation attributes available here. And you don't actually have to type out the attribute part here. So if we do ValidateScript, you'll see that it just auto-completes to ValidateScript. That's because the attribute part is implied by the language, so you don't have to type that part. Now, there is an argument that you can pass into ValidateScript, which is a PowerShell script block. And the script block is going to be executed for the parameter that was fed into the function at invocation time. So how do we use this, right? So basically, this operates very similar to how PowerShell's where object or for each object work, where the PS item or $_ variable, they're called automatic variables, they get automatically populated in certain contexts, right? So PS item in this script context is actually going to contain the person object, a reference to the person object that we passed into the eat function. So what I can do is say if PS item dot first name matches S, so we'll say start of string s, so basically it has to start with an s, then return true. Actually, what I can do is even simplify this further and say if it does not match s, then just return false. So basically we want to return a false if it starts with something that's invalid, right? So that the true false is basically an indicator to PowerShell that we've passed in a valid object or not. So let's go ahead and try to run this now and see what happens. So as you can see, the validation script did not return a true. So what we need to do is actually change this back to $true, change this back to match. That was actually my error. So basically you have to return true in this case explicitly. If you don't return anything, or if you return false, any kind of falsy type of value, then it will fail to validate. So what we're going to do is just test that one more time. We should get the same result. And now what we're going to do is change the first name to something like Sam. So because Sam starts with an S, as indicated by this regular expression here, start of string S, we now get return true in the validate script, and our person object is passed through into the function, and the statement is printed with the person's name, right? So this is just a really easy way for you to catch invalid input that's being passed into your function. You can use this for really any different type of purpose. The contrived example that I used in this particular case was just here for demonstration, but you can apply your own custom logic to just determine what conditions a parameter should or should not be validated, right? And you can do that with complex objects, right? So we're actually passing in a person object, we're inspecting the first name property of that person object, and performing some additional complex validation there. So that's really all there is to using the ValidateScript parameter attribute. If you guys have any questions or comments about this video, feel free to leave them in the comments below. If you like this video, if it was helpful, please leave it a like or a thumbs up, and leave a comment with any other types of content that you would like to see from this channel. Feel free, if you want to support this channel, check out my Patreon page where you can support me. Otherwise, just feel free to subscribe to this channel and provide your support by continually coming back and supporting the channel by watching the content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.